If you're thinking about upgrading to a riding mower, make a path to the Home Depot. Right now, the Pull & Pro 42-inch model's just $11.39. Its 19 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine will power through even the thickest grass, and its rugged reinforced steel cutting deck with 10-year warranty will keep you going and mowing for a very long time. The Pull & Pro 42-inch riding mower, just $11.39, now at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. U.S. only.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures. Saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
Sometimes we need to slow down and remember the simple pleasures in life. Good coffee, good books, and good company. Come on in. Take a seat. The coffee's just been brewed. Let's see who we have in the coffee shop today.
Well, I'm normally looking for books on tables, and there might be a few books with this group. But I'm actually looking for a group of 5, and thankfully one of them's a recurring guest. There they are. And I've got quite an interesting group, and we're going to be discussing writing and editing today. So, Emily, you are the first person in the circle next to me, so how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you? And thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm doing fan-freaking-tastic. So why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am originally from Birmingham, Alabama, went to Auburn University, lived in New York for a while, worked for a couple of CBS soap operas, As the World Turns and Guiding Light. And now I live in Atlanta with my family. And I have 2 books out right now. The first one that I published is Burying the Honeysuckle Girls. And the one that came out this past year is called The Weight of Lies. And that's it. Oh, I've got another one coming out in May called Every Single Secret.
Well, you'll have to come back on and join me on the coffee shop and tell me all about Every Single Secret.
Absolutely.
All right. Ellie, you have a completely different background. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey there. I actually work more in the film industry. Started out in theater, but that does include writing as well. Working on several screenplays at the moment. I got into theater in 2nd grade because that was, a really illustrious age to start. But used to work in New York and then came down here and have just thoroughly enjoyed being in the Southeast at the moment. And actually met my husband, JD, through the writers group that we're both in. So that was quite fortuitous. For myself, I feel. Definitely much more on this theatrical end of it.
In fact, I have a little note of something about you and the show The Walking Dead.
Oh, yes. I like to tap into my morning self when I'm on that show, pre-coffee. Ellie gets into character there. They have killed me off quite a number of times. It's a lot of fun. It's fantastic crew and cast. Everybody's really great. And they have hands down the best catering. So that's probably my favorite part about going there.
And right next to you would be your husband, JD.
Yeah, hi, how are you? I'm like Ellie and Emily before, I'm also an author. My debut novel, Calamity, came out a little over a year ago. It's a sci-fi Western about Calamity Jane, written as in the style of a memoir. So it's a bit of a cross-genre piece. But I've also written for Creative Loafing Atlanta and Pace Magazine and Newsweek as well in shorter form. And Ellie and I actually are both co-founders of a design and media agency here in Atlanta as well, called J&E Creative. So we're pretty busy. We work together during the day, we parent together at night, and we write whenever we can. Though I have not been killed on television nearly as many times as she has. We do collaborate quite frequently. And actually, I like to tell people that the best review my novel Calamity ever got was that Ellie was one of my beta readers. And she sort of fell in love with me while she was reading it. And I think that's a pretty solid endorsement of the text.
Well, that is outstanding. Now, next in my circle would be Chris. How you doing there, Chris?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Yes, my name's Chris Negron, and I live here in Atlanta as well as all these other fine writers that are my friends on the podcast today. I'm from Buffalo, New York originally, and I went to school at Yale University in Connecticut. As far as writing goes, I write most of my published work is short fiction right now. I have a number of stories that have been published in a wide variety of journals, including one that was named one of the top, log listed, I should say, for one of the top 50 very short stories of 2016 by a small website. I have, when I write longer fiction, my books, I write middle grade. And I have one book that's out on submission with publishers through my agent right now, but we're still looking for a publishing home for it at the moment.
Fantastic. And last but hardly not least would be my returning guest, George. Now, I've got a question for you, and I'm going to ask you, besides telling a little bit about yourself, why are all these folks from Atlanta?
Well, this is all entirely my fault. These are all my friends. They have all participated in a critique group that I've run for writers for over a dozen years. I am single-handedly responsible for the marriage of Ellie and JD. I like to tell everybody. They met and fell in love in my critique group, and I fall in love with each and every one of my my writer friends here. They're all wonderful, and so glad you gave us this opportunity to showcase all of them.
And I believe they're all part of the Atlanta Writers Group?
That's correct. The Atlanta Writers Club, which was founded in 1914, and it exists to teach the craft and business of writing, and several of them have participated in conferences that I run. The Atlanta Writers Conference, which is a twice yearly event here in Atlanta.
And you're a published author.
That's correct. I've got 5 novels to date. They span a variety of genres, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. The latest one was a mystery novel, Aftermath, that I had the privilege of discussing with you in 2017 in the coffee shop.
Yep. All right. So for those of you listening, thank you, George. I've got to first thank George for putting this group of wonderful guests together. Yes, this was all George's doing. And the subject is what's really wise and conventional writing wisdom. And I'm going to kind of go around the table with questions. Now, I may not stick to the same order each time, but I'll call you out by name with each question. And after the first person answers, others are more than welcome to jump in. All right, so we're starting off with Emily. New writers.
Yes.
New writers are often advised to write every day. What do you think about that advice?
Well, I think if it works for you, great. I have evolved in my position on this. When I first started writing many years ago, for me, it was a discipline just to finish a book. You know, I wasn't even sure that I could meet that challenge. And so I set a goal for myself to get up every morning, 5 a.m., right until my kids were up, which was usually 6:30 to get ready to go to school. And that was like, it was kind of like if you're going to do a diet or work out, it was just a framework for me to follow. And it worked really well in terms of helping me get the book finished. Now, in my career, I've realized that I need to be a little more flexible. I can't write every day. And for me personally, I shouldn't write every day, because some days I need to just think about the story. Some days I need to outline. Some days I need to work on, a particular problem that I'm encountering. Some days I just have too much to do with my kids. I have 3 kids and, yada, yada. So I can't follow that rule anymore. So, so I've really evolved on my position with that. I think it's really, really helpful if you want to finish a book, finish a first draft, really challenge yourself. But also the flip side is sometimes you can really wear yourself out creatively and kind of feel drained if you're requiring yourself to write a certain number of words every day. So that's my stance.
Anyone
this is KD. I want to add to what you said. I like your metaphor of it's like it works effectively if it's like a diet, but I think that's also, and I know you and I have talked about this before, it's a bit of the risk of it as well, because if you fall off the wagon, then it's very easy to feel like you failed. I know I've tried NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month in October, in the past, and I've been frustrated by it because, like you, I've got kids and jobs and stuff like that, and it's very easy if you have that very narrow definition of writing every day to miss it. But if you have that broader definition where you let stories percolate, or there's the business of writing, like marketing and stuff too, like that, that open-mindedness is good, and it keeps you, I think, from feeling like you're a failure if you don't generate 2,000 words all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for the group, really. Do you feel like just the act of writing is no longer enough for you, since every one of us here has been writing for a while and produced a certain number of stories and manuscripts and all, that it's not enough? We used to say probably that, just the act of writing was, we were learning the craft and, kind of wiring our brain even better as writers because we were just putting one word after another. But now that's not really good enough anymore, is it? You've got to do good writing, not just stringing words together. What do y'all think?
Yeah, this is Chris. I think you're probably right about that. I think probably early on, like Emily was saying, a lot of writers just need to get a book finished, and that's like a major obstacle for them. Maybe they've started and finished and started and stopped and started and stopped. And so, putting a regimen together, writing every day, making this progress is what they really need at that time. But as others have said, as you sort of write more and evolve, you really start to look at, especially once you've been on the submission trail and you've gone after agents and maybe you finally get an agent or whatever, but you start to see, that some work obviously gets rejected. Obviously, we all go through a ton of rejection, and so it changes the way you look at the writing in a ways you just can't, have a goal of finishing something. Now you need to really start breaking apart, what makes the story work, and why is this, as you say, good writing? I mean, it's, good writing is kind of a very subjective term, but I think what you mean by that is, producing a story that works rather than just a story, which is a really a big step from just writing every day when you're starting out.
Yeah, I agree.
Think also
for me, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say smart writing. I really want to write smart instead of just dumping words on the page. I don't know that I do it, but go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. I think also it's like you said, more than just writing. Like there's a lot more that goes into it. I mean, there's the research, there's, what inspires you to do it. I know there's plenty of times that JD and I will talk around a concept or a character or, well before it even gets onto the page. And I think that's just as important to be able to get that good writing down than just sitting down to hammer it out.
Yeah, this is JD. I think, I think maybe contrary to, or back to George's original question, like, I think I still kind of get off is the right word for it, but I still get really excited anytime I'm able to move the ball forward. So because it's always a new story, it's always a new chapter or whatever. And so if I have a great idea while I'm driving around, that gets me excited about it. If I have, just yesterday, I took a stab at writing a draft of a chapter I'd really been struggling with in my brain for a while, and that draft is not perfect. I have to go back and rework it, but I still have made some progress. And it sort of comes back to that, better done than perfect sort of mentality. Is like, I got something down on paper. It's easier for me to go back and fix it than to start from scratch again. So I'm moving that ball forward, and being a writer is a little bit like playing God, and you get to have the universe is your sandbox and all those little metaphors and cliches, but it's really true and it's really exciting. So I have not yet grown weary of it. Ask me after book 10 and my bestseller, and we'll reconvene.
Also, too, I think this is Emily. I think there are different kinds of rewards for the different activities of being a writer. So there's that very particular reward that you get from just sitting down by yourself with a story and, like JD was saying, moving the ball forward or solving a problem, writing a chapter you were struggling with. And then there's another reward for getting a book deal or, having someone read your book and like it. And there's a reward for coming up with a new story idea. And they all feel a little different.
Yeah, I think, and, to what JD was saying, just a point I wanted to add there was just that, I mean, certainly it's also true that a lot of times the real writing is done in revision. So it could be that, here we're saying, well, you have to write, you don't necessarily have to write every day to make, it's more important to make a story that works. And JD was saying that, well, sometimes I like to just move the ball forward. I mean, certainly that's also true that, writing a first draft is sometimes just sort of pushing through it. And I think we all know, or you learn. I don't think I knew it when I started, but I do know it now, which is that, revision is really where you really write. So, yes, I know sometimes people just push through a first draft and maybe sometimes the write everyday thing works for those people who are just trying to push through a first draft as well. So maybe I'm giving both sides of the answers, but that's probably what we'll end up doing quite a bit here today, I think, as well.
Fantastic. Well, Chris.
Yes.
You run a writer's critique group. What are some of the common issues you see for new writers when it comes to developing point of view?
So this is kind of a subtle topic that we've talked about as a group a little bit before. But something I see a lot of is, when new writers are starting out, and we're going to talk about possibly movies a little bit later, but a lot of new writers, have learned from movies, which is not a bad thing. We agree on that. But what tends to happen in a movie is a lot of different points of view, I should say. And what I see in early writers is sometimes I see, a lot of head hopping, points of view that, I sort of question as I review it, why are we in this person's point of view? And I think what I would like to suggest to some newer writers is just to be more intentional about why you're choosing this particular character to tell your story. So is it because you think this character is interesting enough that the reader will connect to them, or that the right to tell the story because they're very interesting, or is it kind of more of what I would say I see a little bit, which is a functional reason, which is like, well, they were in the room when this certain plot event happened, and I need to switch to their point of view because they were the ones in the room, which is not necessarily, at least in my view, in my opinion, a reason to jump into that person's point of view, especially if they're not going to be a character that you see their journey through the story. Typically, we have characters that have an arc, and that's why they have a point of view in the story, because we want to experience that change over the course of the story with them. So it ends up being that a lot of writers say, well, I think I'm just omniscient because I need all these characters. I need to tell the story from all these points of view. And I think sometimes, that can be a little bit of although omniscient is a real point of view that could be used in the right situation, it's, I think, a little bit more rare than I see in early writers.
Great.
And that's, yep.
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, this is George. The only thing I would add is the readers who are listening might be thinking, yeah, this is an esoteric topic, but they react when the writer is bouncing from character to character to character. Maybe the reader doesn't have the point of view kind of technical writerly language that we use, but they get confused that, wait a minute, I thought we were just in the thoughts of this detective, and now we're in the thoughts of this janitor over here who's observing the body, and then we're over, 2 floors down with somebody else. And the writer thinks he's being very clever by doing that, or, I've got to have everybody's opinions represented in the story. But readers, they really do kind of want to travel with very few characters in their heads going through a story, because otherwise it starts to feel very superficial and again confusing, I think. What do y'all think?
Yeah, this is JD. I agree. I think it's something that movies and TV have trained us as storytellers is okay. The way that they tend to jump around either omnisciently or through multiple sort of thinly developed POV characters. And this is not me taking a stab at TV and film, which I love and would love to write more of. I think it's something that that genre can do maybe a little easier than in the written form. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule. If anyone's read George R.R. Martin, he jumps POV character all the time, every chapter, but they're all very well developed. There's still a relative handful of them that we have to navigate through. But if you look at some really successful storytelling, like I'm sure we can come up with various examples, but the one that comes to my mind is J.K. Rowling. Like, the entire Harry Potter series is really told from the point of view of one character, Harry. And there are a number of devices that allow him to see beyond his immediate setting, right? But it's also extremely helpful because it lets us, explore and navigate the world as he finds out about it. So that the author, or she's not required to give us the big info dumps, the big exposition to tell us the history of magicking in Britain for 1,000 years, because Harry doesn't know it and he's not exposed to it. So it can be revealed progressively. And that's, I think, the advantage of that small POV as opposed to the big omniscient POV, is that it gives the reader time to breathe and absorb stuff, without having to have those big info dumps.
All right.
I agree.
By all means, continue, Emily.
Well, I was just going to say I really agree. JD put it really well, and I use first person in my books, and usually only stick to one character's point of view for that exact reason, because I write suspense novels where they're having to figure out who to trust and what's going on in this, mysterious setting and what clues mean. And to me, it's just a perfect match. It would be so difficult for me to head hop to the villain. Like, I just couldn't do that. So, I've never even really thought about why I do that, but yeah, everything JD said, exactly.
You're
yeah.
giving a really big head, guys.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think, this is Chris again. I don't think any of us would be against, multiple points of view. And I've read many of these folks' books and they have used them. So it's not that we're making this statement against multiple points of view. But I think the general term would be, just be intentional with why you're choosing this particular point of view, and make it a little bit more about the character and a little bit less about the plot in terms of, well, this person was there, so I have to switch to this. As JD was saying with the Harry Potter example, I think there's always ways to stick with your smaller core of characters and yet get the information out that you need to get it out. And he mentioned the various devices where Harry was connected to Voldemort, and that kind of thing. That allows, you to sort of stay with Harry and yet show you what Voldemort is doing. And that's just a perfect example. In fact, I'll probably use that in my critique group going forward when I'm trying to make this point.
I mean, I do think one last thing, I do think it works really well in film and TV as well, right? Especially film where you have a very narrow, you have 2 hours to tell a story. So that one POV character who can serve as the cipher for the audience often results in a better narrative. But, omniscient is easier to pull off there. And I wish it were easier to pull off in written form.
Anything else on point of view? All right. Well, I think we've wrapped up that topic. Now, JD, your sci-fi western is centered on a young Calamity Jane and a green alien.
That's right.
How do you combine these two unique things that many writers hear? And there's always the write what you know and only write about people like yourself. So how do you write about green aliens and a young Calamity Jane? I'm sure you never met her in person.
No, I haven't. And to be fair, I have thought about writing stuff closer to home, stories about middle-class white graphic designers, but it really wasn't what was grabbing me at the moment. And so one of the things I like to joke about when I talk about Calamity, because I get this question a fair amount, is that I was never a 15-year-old girl, and I was never particularly good with them when it was appropriate anyway. So the challenge, I think, is sort of, again, stretching your mind around, what does it mean to write what you know? So no, I don't have a firsthand experience with being a teenage girl, much less in the Wild West, much west with an alien gunslinger by your side. But there are elements of her personality that I know very well. She has a famous anger management problem. And at the time that I wrote the book, I was in a relatively unhappy place. So I was able to channel some of that into, my version of her voice. But then the other stuff, the other components, what's it like to be in the Wild West? What's it, what was life like for women in the West at the time, much less the West writ large? Those are things, you can educate yourself about and fill in the gap. So write what you know could also be, sort of a challenge to what do I need to learn so that I can write this effectively. I never liked Westerns growing up and had very rarely willingly watched one or read one prior to working on this book. But, knowing this was a story I wanted to tell, having sort of been intrigued by this character and the possibility of meshing her with a sci-fi narrative, that drove me to watch a lot of Westerns, to read a lot of Westerns so that I knew the genre well enough to slide my story into it and not repeat cliches, except for where it was, of course, valuable to my narrative, right? Being able to, have a cowboy talk like it, right? And have it sound right or have it read right. Those are all things that are learnable. So, I think it's just sort of that if you take a broad view of what does it mean to write what you know, from a character perspective, Jane and I were pretty eye to eye with the exception of, our gender and particular experiences, and the rest of the world I was able to fill in around her. And kind of getting back to the POV question, if I can kind of blend these two together for a second, is this book happens to be written in the first person, which is enormously liberating to, I think, to an author, not just because grammar can be a little looser when the entire book is dialogue, but also because I didn't have to know what Jane didn't know, or at least I didn't have to work it into the text, right? So obviously I needed to know what was going on maybe off stage that she wasn't seeing, but she doesn't know why the Sioux are in revolt during that time period, so she doesn't talk about it. She doesn't know where this alien came from, so she doesn't talk about it. And so I, as the author, had to have the answers to those questions in terms of writing what I know. But my character didn't. And again, I think that helps with sort of reining in the tendency to write a lot of exposition, which isn't germane to the story.
And I think too, this is Ellie here, one of the things that got me into writing in the first place when I was much younger was reading. And to say, oh, you should only write what you know goes so against that whole thought of, when you first start out, you're hungry to read and to learn and find out all these new things that you don't know. So as a writer, I think, part of that process is the research, is the finding out all of these new and exciting things, whether it starts with a concept or a character or a place, whatever the idea starts with. And then you can go from there. And granted, whatever it is, you do have to be careful. Like, for example, are you a white man writing a book about a black slave person, or, you do your research really, really well. But I think it's ridiculous to say, no, you can only write what you know. And then you're really limiting yourself in that sense.
Yeah, this is JD again. I think Ellie hits on a really strong point, which is that as authors, we need to be mindful and self-aware enough that as we write farther away from maybe what we know intrinsically or know super well, it's incumbent upon us to reach out and find other resources that will help validate us and validate our work. So in the example of Calamity, where I was writing a first-person story about a 15-year-old girl, I didn't take for granted the fact that I might be able to write her voice well. So among the beta readers that I tapped to review the book in the first place, the vast majority of them were women, because my main concern was, again, I'm a guy writing a female protagonist. I want to make sure I've done this justice, that it's authentic, and that it doesn't, fall victim to a lot of the cliches of male gaze and male imagination. So I've got a short story right now, for instance, that I'm shopping around that is about a Native American. Again, I'm not a Native American, so I'm currently soliciting.
You're not?
Right? I'm currently soliciting some readers to help me with that work as well. And I think that's just part of, write what you know is also being self-aware about what do you know and should you bring in someone to help you.
And also, I think it's, this is Emily. I think it's important, too, that we mention, in the publishing industry, we have the Own Voices movement. And so while I think that you can write anyone and, from any race or culture, if you do your research well, I think that it's important to maybe be willing to step back and let some of those other people step forward. That's all I had to say about that.
Emily, do you want to talk about sensitivity readers? Because you've had a lot of experience with them.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot. I will say I've used one. I found a database online. I think I sent it to you, JD. I can't remember what it's called.
You did.
Yeah. Anyway, it has a whole list of readers who will read your book for a very nominal fee, and let you know if you've kind of hit on stereotypes, if there's any sort of cultural insensitivity that you've kind of blundered into, and then they make suggestions. And I used a woman, a Native American sensitivity reader for The Weight of Lies, and she was fantastic. And I mean, again, it's just suggestions. She just says, like, for instance, I had an event happening at a place that was really a sacred, holy spot to Native Americans. And she said, it's fine. I'd created this event there. And she said, it's fine for you to do that. I just want you to let you know that this is a sacred spot to us. And, it might offend some people. So that was easy enough for me to make a change, and, invent another event at a different town. So it was, to me, it was an entirely positive experience.
Emily, that was writeinthemargins.org was the database there, if that's helpful for folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been scouring that database since you sent it to me, precisely again for a Native American sensitivity reader. It's a very, very thorough resource in terms of helping you find folks to help you write out, help you with your writing a little bit outside your culture or a little bit of outside your experience.
Yeah.
Anything else on that topic? All right. Well, we are going to take a brief commercial break, and I'm going to pour some coffee and pass the pot to my guests, and we will see you on the other side.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRNRadio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
All right, thank y'all for hanging in there with us while we paid those radio station bills. Now, we are going to move on with our question and answer session with all these wonderfully intelligent people from the Atlanta Writers Group or Atlanta Writers Club. I'll have to get George to clarify that one later. But for right now, I want to turn to Ellie. Ellie?
Hi. Yes.
As an actress, you've collaborated with a lot of people, but you're a writer married to a writer. How does that impact your writing? Because most people think of writing as this solitary activity where you're holed up in a room with nobody else around, just sitting at the keyboard.
Oh, it actually works really well. But I think that it works really well for us. I think it's a very individualized thing on how you write. JD and I are very fortunate. We like to do almost everything together. Like I said before, frequently we'll talk through different scenes about different characters. We have done different writing things together, or different projects. I personally have no problem writing in the same room with him, whereas as long as he has headphones, he's good with it. But I think as far as the whole concept of, writing being a very solitary event, whether the act of writing itself, some people do need to be alone, but I think it's so important to have that community of people around you to be able to have feedback and critique, so that you're, I don't know if I can say that, so that you're just not stroking your own cock there. But, it's super easy to just say like, oh, look at my pretty baby, I wrote something so amazing. But having that outside perspective is so incredibly helpful. And it's great to catch things that you don't see because you're so familiar with the work. So it's very helpful to have my husband, who is also a writer, be like, oh, hey, did you not notice this? Or, I really like this about this character, but maybe you need to think about this aspect, and so forth.
Speaking as the husband, I'll say, of course I agree with her because she's my wife, but also I agree because I think it's good practice not just to have those folks like our group has each other, but also to have those people in mind even when you're writing. Because it may be solitary. I'll slip off to Starbucks or blast my headphones to drown out the kids or whatever in order to write. But in the back of my head, I'm always thinking about someone else is going to read this, right? If I'm just writing for myself, that's not, it may be personally rewarding, but that's not a career. That's not really the craft or the artistry in making a book. You've got to have, Stephen King calls it your first reader in mind, but it's some sort of audience in your head. Like, who am I writing this for? And then who am I going to show it to? Like, so that I can get that feedback, that first reader feedback, or that sensitivity reader feedback, or so that you can sort of hear it back and get feedback back on yourself, so it can be tested more or less before you show it to agents and editors.
Yeah, this is Chris. So yeah, obviously critique is critical. We're kind of expanding the original topic into sort of a critique group topic as well. But it's I know that all writers have different perspectives on this. So like George runs the critique group that we all met in actually, and I participate in also another one that you mentioned. And for me, I find that it's good to have, those kind of critique groups. Typically what you do is you bring 5 to 10 pages, and we also have one that we do ourselves, but this group that's on the podcast, but you bring 5 to 10 pages and you read them to the participants, or they read them ahead of time. And what I find just with my writing, and it's not true for everybody I know, even on this call, but what I find is that when I'm prepping the pages for that particular meeting, and I'm suddenly aware that other people are going to see them, I start making all sorts of changes that the first 4 times I read over those same pages I didn't make. So for me, the perspective sort of changes. It's very subtle. But it definitely happens. I know that some people would prefer just to write the whole draft and then have critique, and there is no wrong answer there, I think, but just, letting you know what my experience has been with those smaller critique groups that you bring small pages to.
Anybody else on this topic?
Well, I think, this is Emily, I think I haven't quite figured out, like, there's sometimes that I really want to be with my community of writers and interact with writers and ask them questions and brainstorm with them. And then and maybe this is just a function of being more of an introverted person, but then there are other times where I just want to shut the world away and write by myself. And I never can predict when that is. So I think it's really, I think it's a good idea if you're a new writer, but even, no matter where you are, to build your community and to make sure that you have like some really trusted friends and people you admire, who are doing what you're doing, so that you can always reach out and get support. And also just too, in the business end of things, it can, Chris was talking about, we all get rejected a lot. It can be really demoralizing. And so not only creatively being together and sustaining each other, but I think just from the business side, it can really help to have your tribe of people that you can talk to and ask questions, their experience, and get information. Information sharing is very important. So, yeah.
I think too, it's also important to have and find a trusted community. It's important to be able to receive feedback, but also to know when to trust your work and your stuff. Like I know JD had an agent interested in his book early on that was like, well, if you just take out the Green Man, it's going to be great. And it's like, well, no, it's Calamity Jane and the Green Man. Like that's the story, So, but that also was not a critique, that his trusted community had given. So, trusting both your community as well as your gut. I think that's a fine balance there to have.
Yeah, and I think this is JD again. I think having that community, this good community we're talking about, which we have with each other, and I think we all have our own with other folks as well. There are a lot of opportunities as a writer that you'll get only by having that community. So in the sense that, yeah, at the end of the day, the actual act of putting words on paper may be solitary, but the business of editing and marketing and talking about and brainstorming and networking as a writer, like the better the community there, the better it'll work for you as an author. Opportunities for things like anthologies and short stories and collaborations will be available because you've broadened that network. And I think most of us have benefited from that. Like, that's how we refer agents to each other. That's how we, maybe or maybe not, like, post a bunch of Goodreads reviews for each other. That sort of stuff. Like, it's a bit incestuous, but it's very profitable both for the creative act as well as the business act of writing.
Any other thoughts on this topic? All right. Well, it seems we've been gabbing quite a while here in the coffee shop, and unfortunately, Ellie has to get running. So, Ellie, why don't you give out your social media contact information before you exit the coffee shop?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it, and having all of us. My personal website is elliedecker.com. That's Ellie with an I-E. And if you wanted to look me up on the Instagrams, it's just Ellie Decker, ELLIEDECKER.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming to visit us in the coffee shop. And I'm sorry you can't stay while the rest of us sit and gab the afternoon away, but it's been fun. And maybe I'll see you next time in the coffee shop.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care. All right. George, I'm putting you on the hot seat now. People have been told you should pick one genre and stick with it. You've written multiple genres: historical fiction, Southern Gothic, modern romance, children's book, and mystery. Wait a minute. You're supposed to stick with one genre. But you broke that conventional rule. How has this worked out for you?
It's been a blessing and a curse, frankly. I think it's good advice for a new writer to really hone her craft in a single genre and become a master of that genre. Because chances are, if she wants to be traditionally published, that publisher is going to offer her not a deal for that single manuscript, but often a 2 or 3 book deal. And the expectation is that the second book you turn in is going to have to be within the genre of the first book, because they want to build an audience around you. And there are a lot of readers who don't skip genres. They just read romances, or they, love historical fiction. They love mysteries or whatever. Whereas I have just always written what I felt like writing, just the story that I wanted to tell at the time. And I think I have interests that go all over the place, and maybe I'm a little ADHD and and tend to bounce all over the place in what I read. So maybe it's not a surprise that what I write tends to be quite diverse from book to book. I just finished a thriller, which is yet another genre that's different from everything else I've written. So I've had readers in book clubs who have commented to me that, oh, I really love that first book I read. I really loved Hardscrabble Road, and I keep waiting for you to write something else like that. And then I have other people in that same book club who say, oh, I love reading something different each time. And who's right? They're both right. And I think what we've all found with our stories and our novels is that each one finds a different audience. So Emily, since you've got multiple books, I'd be curious to get your take, especially on whether people who loved your first book, did they automatically love your second book, or did the second book find a home with readers who didn't much care or didn't bother with the first one?
Well, yeah. I mean, so my books are all basically in the same genre, right? So they're like suspense, kind of crossed with women's fiction. And yeah, no, I think even within that sort of narrow framework, there were definitely readers who were like, well, I didn't like this one as much, or this one was way better. So I think it's impossible to please everyone. But for now, suspense is my genre. And I do have, I like to kind of creep out on the edges and get sometimes towards horror, sometimes towards a little historical and romance, but definitely suspense. I think probably too, Chris can talk about genre changing. He's had some experience with that.
Yeah, so I've kind of done both. So I've actually completed, this is going to be, since I'm not published yet, this might be a little bit of a shock, or it might be good information for people, but I've completed now six books. And it's funny because if I look back, I have 2 books sort of in each genre I've tried, which, again, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I started out sort of writing like, I'm not even sure what genre is in, and that's kind of, part of my point. Later, I think we're going to have another topic about, writing what you like to read, but, it was stuff that I like to read. So it was sort of like Neil Gaiman-y kind of, type of fiction. And then I switched to like book club genre, and I did a couple books in that genre, and now I'm writing the middle grade. So, I do feel like I've found much more of a home in the middle grade. So I do plan on staying here more. But I think that comes with, sort of, I've switched genre, but then once I've switched, I've tried to stay in the genre. And I guess my experience has been in each case, you do learn to write. You feel like, obviously every writer feels like each book they write is their best book yet, right? Hopefully. But especially within the genre, like you feel like you're learning, like, for example, for me, I feel like I'm learning to write the middle grade. So my first attempt at it was pretty good, hopefully good enough. There's some people looking at it. Maybe it will be published, I hope. But I do feel like the second one, which I just completed, I learned obviously through both books, a lot more about writing in the genre. So I do think there's some value, once you feel like you found your genre, to, stay in it, just because I do think, just like anything, any type of job, you learn to grow within that area that you're working in. And each time you do, my day job is, for example, IT programming. And obviously I'm a much better programmer now than I was, 15 years ago or whatever. So it's true in any type of endeavor. You're going to learn and you're going to get a little bit better. But I also see George's perspective. I mean, you got to write what you want to write at the time you're writing, and if you want to change genres, I mean, that's the beauty of this. Is for a lot of us, this is our creative endeavor, and you should be able to pursue that without necessarily worrying about it. So definitely both sides. Yep.
Yeah, this is JD. I mean, I would say that I think all of us have, and we've seen bits of each other's writing that goes well beyond the genres that we're published in. And I think until you're published, you don't need to worry about it, right? Because you're putting lightning rods up in the air hoping to get struck, and you don't know what that's going to be. I know that I had written two novels prior to Calamity that were not picked up, that were very, they were also had a science fiction bent, but they were very different genres, or subgenres of science fiction. And yes, I might go back to them, but right now, I'm gonna work on another one that's in the same space, because I've carved out a tiny little niche there, and I'm gonna try to grow it. But I think until you're published, don't worry about it.
I can agree with that. I would say that now that I've published almost 3 books, there is a certain expectation, right, from my editor and the imprint that published my books. And yes, I could go off the track. But just in terms of ease of already knowing who my readers are and what my editor and my publishing company expects out of me. So I have I'm trying to build this kind of audience, this readership. And for me to kind of switch directions might be artistically fulfilling, but I wouldn't be doing myself any favors. So, I mean, there's a million different ways to look at it. And I have author friends who write simultaneously in 2 different genres. I don't know how they do it, like 2 books a year type thing. And I don't, that's that's a lot of work. So it can be done for me. For now, I feel really grateful to be able to have published the books that I have, and to have, have another 4th contract. And so I'm going to stay in my lane for now, because I'm enjoying it.
Anybody else on multiple genres? Okay. Well, Emily, we are coming back to you. Many writers feel when they finally get their big break, they've got the agent or the publishing contract or even a bestseller, they'll be set for life. You've done all that. What are the lessons you've learned along the way, and what do you continue to learn?
Well, the first thing I've learned is that you're not set for life. It's what I'm learning is that there's no sort of pinnacle that you reach where you say, "That's it. I've done it. I'm safe. I will always have. I will always be a published author. I think definitely I will always write. But really, the cold reality seems to be that you're, with some exceptions, you're only as good as the last book that you wrote. And it really, sales really do matter. And it's, it's unfortunate that it is that way, but it is. And publishers look at, and editors look at how well your last book sold. And, anything can happen. And I think the industry is changing daily and evolving. And there's just there's so much more out there than I even really understand. So many different platforms and avenues for writers to get their work out there. But I will say, just in a traditional publishing sort of arena, that's kind of the lesson that I've learned. And so when we were talking the other night about some of these topics, we did talk about So you can't really rest on your laurels, but you do want to celebrate each milestone that you reach. So when you finish a draft of a book, that's a celebration. And when you finish the third draft of it and send it off, that's a celebration. When you get an agent, that's a celebration. When you sell your first book, that's a celebration. When you get a 2-book deal, that's a celebration. When you win an award, there's like this sort of, there's always something to celebrate. And even if it's just, I'm coming up, I came up with this great new idea, that's something to celebrate. So there's a good and bad to it, but I could talk forever about that. I'll let somebody else talk.
Yeah, this is Chris. I guess maybe part of the point of what we're saying here with this one is just that some people will feel like you can't go backwards, and you most certainly can. Unfortunately, in the world, whether it's you get an agent, but then at some point you don't have that agent anymore, and you have to start that all over again. That process of finding an agent, or as maybe Emily's more referring to, it could be that you have a publisher. But you have to keep producing, great books, as she does for her publisher, in order to, continue that relationship. And there's nothing that says that, well, I hit that milestone and now it becomes this fixed thing that I can't go beneath that again. Unfortunately, you can. Hopefully you don't, but it is possible. I'm on my second agent, so I've had that kind of a little bit of a roller coaster with that part for different reasons. And I think we all probably have those different things that have happened with, the various stages along the way, for sure.
Yeah, there's no like, once you're in the club, you're always in the club. It's not like that. Like, I've heard so many stories from authors losing their agents, or their editor leaves, or their imprint folds and they lose their book deal, or, just some really dramatic, sometimes discouraging stories. So, yeah.
But that doesn't mean, like you said, we shouldn't celebrate the milestones we get, right? Like, take a picture of yourself with your book on the shelf, when it happens, because that's like what we're working for so long. Like, enjoy it and then get back to work, I guess.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yes.
All right. Anybody else on that topic? Okay. Then we are going to take, another commercial break. It's going to be a wonderful, special, extra long episode and chance to hang out here in the coffee shop. And of course, I got to get my caffeine fix again. And I will see you folks on the other side of this commercial break.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk, or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now. 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
All of you for hanging in there with us while we do this extended version of writing and some of the basic fundamentals and various other bits and pieces for you authors who listen to this show. Now, I am going to bring back all of my wonderful guests. Now, we have hit on a lot of topics. Now, I do have to back up and add one comment here. And I'm going to go back to George's multiple genres. I got to admit, I'm a genre reader first. My first genre is thriller, but I'll read anything that crosses my path. Just leave it there for about 5 minutes. I'll pick it up.
It's a good way to be.
I am not a writer. No desire to write. Sorry, don't put me in that club. I'll stay behind the microphone and just talk to writers and authors and people that make these wonderful things I love, such as that are called books. Now, Chris.
Yes.
One bit of conventional wisdom. It's almost the exact opposite to write what you know. It's called write what you read. What's your take on this?
Right. So, and this is partially from my own experience, but also some other folks I've seen. I think most writers start out, and rightfully so, thinking they want to write, in the same genre that they most enjoy reading in. So, as you were just saying with your thriller genre, that's what you most enjoy, and rightfully so, as I say, because I do believe strongly in write what you love, and if you love that genre, then probably that should be your first attempt. What I see though a little bit is that sometimes writers, and I found this out myself, you find out through your own experimentation or through the feedback you get from your critique partners and things like that maybe your style lends itself to something else. And so I found out, as I said earlier, I'm in the middle grade genre right now, and it came about because I was writing some short stories, and I was writing about in groups of kids in some of these short stories just as sort of an experimentation. And in fact, Emily suggested to me that I really had a strong voice in that area. And so I started to think, maybe I should write, books that are in that genre. So middle grade books are, now that I'm writing in it, I've read quite a lot of them. But at the time, I wasn't really reading middle grade. As an adult, it's not something that you necessarily go back and grab, although many adults do. But now that I'm reading them as well, I'm finding, hey, these are some of my favorite books, and it just wouldn't have been what I suspected, right? So I think writing in the genre you read is certainly fine. If you love high fantasy, maybe you're the next George R.R. Martin or something. But it could be that you're not. It could be that, what you're writing, what you enjoy reading is not what your style lends itself to. So my suggestion to new writers is just to be open to that possibility as you go through this journey, and you may hear some feedback that you may want to listen to that will move you in a different direction.
Anybody else want to jump in here?
This is JD. I think that's really interesting, Chris, because I think as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that I don't read westerns, or at least I didn't until I needed to do research. I grew up reading hard science fiction and high fantasy, like you're talking about, neither of which are what I've written. But if they're good stories, if they're well written, then the genre, I don't know that that's the most important thing, right? Like I read a lot of Michael Chabon's probably my favorite author. He's very literary. I don't write literary fiction, but his stuff is solid, and I've learned a lot about writing from reading his stuff. So I don't know that it I guess matters too much from the way I approach writing. That I'm not writing exactly what I read. You really sort of piqued some thoughts in me there about going to my bookshelf and dissecting it a bit.
And I think you can learn a lot from reading widely. Like I love reading old books. I'm a huge Daphne du Maurier and Shirley Jackson, and so I find myself going back to older books, and then I love YA fiction. I read all of the chick lit books, back in the 90s, the Bridget Jones era. And I've dabbled a little bit in science fiction, not much fantasy, but I did find out that I gravitate towards suspense, reading it and also watching it on film and TV. So I kind of match up in a boring way.
And I guess we've established that I've written one of everything, and damn if I don't read one of everything. So I won't weigh in here.
I am going to weigh in because, and I've mentioned my favorite author on air before, Brad Thor, and I was listening to one of his audiobooks, and at the end of the audiobook, he and the guy that had read it, and the name of the reader escapes me, did an interview, and Brad was asked what advice he would give to new readers, and he said, write what you read, because you know the plot and the pacing you like and things like that. So, like I said, I'm not a writer, and we all know I'll read anything, So I think if I was going to be a writer, I'd end up like George, going in 5 or 6 different directions all at the same time.
I don't think that's bad advice. I mean, but I think if you have a broad view of it too, we live in an environment where books are not necessarily competing with the other books on the shelf. They're competing with television and movies and video games, all of which are excellent platforms for storytelling too. So it could be that the stories you're consuming, the quote unquote books that you need to read, could be film, it could be serial TV, that bingeable television that's super long format. That's actually much more like books than I think we often give credit for. So I think if you're focused on good story, and as you said with Brad Thor, if you're knowledgeable about your genre, so that you're not repeating plots, you're mindful of cliches, and sort of cliches often is used pejoratively, but like also the expectations and the archetypes of a genre, like that is excellent advice, because it's getting your research. It's so that you write what you know. Yeah.
I would agree with that too. I mean, I think it's important to know the conventions of your genre and what, a reader of that genre is going to expect when they pick up your book. But also there's something to be learned from every genre. But yeah, I think that there's some very specific conventions that you ignore at your own peril. I'll just say it that way.
Right. I agree with that. And I as everyone else has said, I think, Brad's advice would be, definitely a good advice, kind of counter to what I just said a second ago, but I certainly don't disagree. And in fact, something that JD just said about TV shows and movies, and what Emily was saying about, hey, this is what I consume, is suspense. These are the types of movies I like to watch. If I think about it, I say, well, I wasn't reading middle grade, so it kind of surprised me that I went into that genre. But if I think about the movies I like, like Super 8 or Stranger Things, or even going back to E.T., like all those things are totally my jam, and it's always, bands of kids, and it's sort of what I write now as well. So really the source was there, and probably I do know the conventions in some certain way, at least in, movie and TV form, from those things being some of my favorite things. So yeah, I totally agree with that as well.
Yeah, because there are some genres that have become increasingly defined by non-written media, right? So when I was researching Westerns, you can't ignore John Wayne or Clint Eastwood, right? He's not, they're not in books, they're on screen. Just like in hard science fiction, it's interesting to see how much some established genres or titles like Star Trek have trended towards the visual language of video games like Mass Effect, right? And so if you're writing hard science fiction these days, you've got to look at Star Wars, which is arguably a whole different genre anyway, but you've got to look at Star Wars and Star Trek and and Mass Effect and titles like those, not just the Expanse series and the other books that live in that space, because the competition is more varied. But I think that makes it more exciting too.
Absolutely, I agree.
Any last thoughts on that topic? Okay, now guess what, JD?
Yes,
your
ma'am.
turn. Writers are told they have to read a lot of books to learn how to write, and that watching TV shows and movies doesn't count. What's your take on this one? And we were just, it's a great segue, guys. Couldn't have planned it.
Yeah, we were just talking about this, right? And I think it can be tackled really two different ways. And one is the idea that good storytelling is just good storytelling. So if I consume Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, or if I consume it in the original novel form, it's still a great story. And actually, it may be very informative to do both, so that you can see where the differences lie. Chris mentioned Stranger Things a minute ago. Stranger Things is as influential on modern day sort of horror writing as Stephen King was, and it's an homage to Stephen King. So I think there's a lot that you can take away from these. And sometimes I think it's specific to the genre, or specific to the scope of the title. I mentioned The Expanse a minute ago, which is a 7-novel now science fiction series that began life as an outline for a massive multiplayer online game. And when the Chinese developer balked at $100 million to develop the game, the guys decided eventually to turn it into books. So there's a world building component that you can learn from these other formats as well, just from consuming them. But also, Ellie and I dabble in screenwriting, and I think there's a lot that you can learn from the way stories are actually written in these other formats as well. Pacing elements that you can sort of divine out of a screenplay. Screenplays are actually a super great way to even start thinking about long format fiction work too, like a novel, because in a screenplay, there's no opportunity for exposition at all, short of having a narrator, right? Everything has to be dialogue or action. And so it's a way to craft, ideally, I think, a very svelte book, right? Or story, because you get right into the action, you get right into the interaction between characters without worrying about saying what happened 5 years ago and what's the political situation right now and all that stuff. And you do it in 110 pages because it's a screenplay. So I think, again, being mindful of the fact that our consumers, our users, to use the design parlance that I'm used to, our users are looking at novels. They're also looking at television. They're probably more frequently looking at television shows and movies. And some segment of them, depending on your genre, is going to be comparing you to video games as well. And so wherever there's good storytelling, absorb that, right? Because epic level fiction, be it in a TV series or a video game, might inform how you write a 7-book series, or a really concise, super well-written movie that's very self-contained could really inform a 90,000-word novel. So yeah, good writing's good writing, and we should be sponging it up.
JD, I have a question for you, since you've been turning Calamity into a TV series. Were there some things when you were thinking about your TV scripts where you thought, "Oh shoot, I wish I had done this in the book before it was published"? I now have an even better idea that would have worked really well in the book, but you could only come at that because you were condensing things and distilling things for a television script.
I really appreciate the shout out, by the way.
Absolutely. That's my job.
Right. So yeah, as George said, I'm working with a production company called Nine Toe Productions to adapt Calamity to a television series. And it's been an extremely informative process because even though my wife works in television and film a lot, we're often exposed to material that was written specifically for that, not an adaptation. So the particular challenge is actually a flip side of one we were talking about before, which was, here's a 300-page novel. And the novel itself, we're adapting into, let's say we wanted to spread that across 2 seasons of 8 or 10 episodes, right? Sort of your Netflix or Hulu bingeable style television. One of the questions we kept asking ourselves as we started pacing it was, the book is first person point of view from Calamity Jane's perspective. What is she not seeing in the book that could live in the television show? Because TV lends itself more to an omniscient perspective. While you may have a primary POV, you often have multiple plots and multiple arcs moving in tandem or in parallel of one another across an episode or across an entire season. So there've been some pretty cool, exciting opportunities as we've paced out and plotted out the seasons, to say, we know that this bad guy rancher stole the spaceship in chapter 1, but we don't see anything he does until chapter 7 of the book. Can we show that, as plot C, going on through the first couple of episodes? And so it does make the world a little bit bigger. And frankly, just the process, you were talking about collaborating with other writers, the idea of collaborating with other people who, one, like your book, which never gets old, and two, have other ideas about it. If you're willing to sort of, let people in on that experience, it's pretty exciting to have other ideas injected into your narrative. The degree to which this is going to land on a screen near you, we'll see. But it has been a very exciting process. And I think the fact that Calamity was greatly informed through me doing research on Western film genre has helped sort of tee it up, because there are sort of cinematic components to the narrative that have lent very well to adaptation.
Yeah, and I guess I have a couple thoughts, following up on that. Obviously, one is that ties to the point of view thing that we were talking about earlier, just to sort of put a bow on that one, which is that, I mean, JD's absolutely right. So they went the opposite way. They went from a narrower point of view to saying, okay, now we're envisioning this for television, so we should have a more omniscient point of view. And earlier we talked about the opposite. So just to, like I said, put a bow on that one. And then I had a second thought, but it has left my head, so I'm going to turn it over to somebody else, and maybe it'll come back to me.
Well, I wanted to add that in terms of screenplay writing, that's kind of where I started too. And I have found it really helpful in plotting books to use the Sid Field model of a 3-act structure. And I can't remember what the name of his books are.
Save the Cat. Save the Cat.
No, it's not that one. It's
Okay.
I could probably look it up right now. It's something boring like Fundamentals of Screenwriting or whatever. But at any rate, it really sort of helps you hang your story on kind of a one of them's called Screenplay. One of them's called the Screenwriter's Workbook. But anyway, it's just, I call them tent poles, turning points and midpoints and sort of labeling what's happening in each act. And that's really been helpful for me when I've plotted my books, because I felt like my books need to move really quickly. They have to have like really good pacing, keep you flipping the pages, cliffhanger, chapter endings, all of that that a movie does really well. So that I've found his paradigm really helpful. Oh yeah, it's called the Sid Field paradigm. What do you know?
Cool. Yeah, so the other thing that I thought of, what I was meant to say earlier was, and this may tie, Emily, to what you were just saying, because I think I've heard this from you as well, and maybe you know a little more about it. But JD said something about visual aspects, because he was adapting it for television, and it made me think of sort of like set pieces, which is another sort of movie thing that you get that a lot of times I think all of us try to incorporate into our writing. And I think that comes, a little bit more from a screenwriting, a movie type of atmosphere where there's a lot of visualness to it and that type of thing. And, then you incorporate that into your books, or at least I try to. I know I made the comment the other night. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's a real cinematic way of writing. And I know the first time I really heard somebody talking about it, it was the workshop that I took with Benjamin Percy. And he was talking about that being a part of plotting, coming up with your story, is thinking of some really visual cinematic set pieces that you could center scenes or sequences around, just a handful of them. So it's just a different way to think about your book rather than plot points. You're thinking about something that, tell me, there's a podcast where they talk about those moments of wonder or awe, where your reader reads this scene that you've set up and they're just wonderstruck because they've never seen anything like it. You've painted a picture for them that's very visual, cinematic. So that's the goal.
Yeah, and it has me thinking too, sorry, just quickly, it has me thinking too about comic books, which is something that I come from. I've read, I can't tell you how many comic books, and obviously they have a visual aspect to them as well. And, you get to a certain point in the story and you open up and it's a double page spread and there's, sort of that very visual, like set piecey type thing. And I try to, in fact, my book that's on submission with publishers now has a comic book sort of embedded into it. So I've definitely used that sort of experience mixing movies and comic books and really everything I consume into the work I do. So I agree with what JD was saying and everybody else about, don't discount movies, don't discount TV. And I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody, I think. Maybe not.
No, I think that topic seems to have come to a close. Now, I have one thing I've noticed with all of you. It isn't on my checklist, so I'm going to just kind of throw it out there, and you guys can see who wants to take it. I've noticed you all mention plotting. None of you seem to do what often I read about and hear about when I talk with NaNoWriMos, because I actually interact pretty heavily with the NaNoWriMo community. I host a chat room on my website, Jesse's Coffee Shop, for them. It's open year-round, but primarily gets used in November. And the other side of that coin is pantsing, not knowing. One of the Rymos I was talking with this year didn't even know what genre she was going to write. And I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, you have to have some idea. Nope, I'll just see what words fall out. And it just struck me, and I've heard the word plotting from each of you in one context or another. So why don't you guys discuss on why there should be, plotting versus pantsing, and why you guys all seem to think plotting is a good idea?
This is George. I'll take the first whack at it. From my perspective, it's because I have wasted untold hours and gone through countless drafts of early manuscripts because I pantsed rather than figured out what I really needed to write as far as plots and turns and the tent poles and all the good words that Emily used and JD and Chris. You can waste so much time when you're discovering your story instead of taking probably a tenth of that time if you sat down before you start even writing chapter 1 on your first page to figure out what your story is, who your characters are, so you don't discover it as you go along, and along the way discover that you have you've started in the wrong place, you're telling it from the point of view of the wrong character, and this plot doesn't work because you're writing about something that is really esoteric and nobody will care about over the course of 300 pages. It just won't hold together. So when I first started out, I had taken a class from this guy, and he was a total pantser. And in fact, he claimed that you get into this meditative state, man, and God will be writing through your fingertips. Honestly, this is what he said. And I didn't know anything, so I believed it. And so I would get up at 4 a.m. before I was fully awake, because that was one of his techniques, was, not really being completely aware, and just start writing, and God would be writing through my fingertips. And it was only when I became fully awake that God would cease to write through my fingertips, and then I would be just amazed at what I had produced. And not what I had produced, of course, but what the divine had produced. And what the divine had produced was utter crap. It didn't work at all on any level. And yet I didn't know any better, and so I totally invested in this, and it was only after 6 or 8 months of this kind of pardon the term bullshit that I finally realized that I need to figure out what my story is. I need to figure out who the characters are. What is the plot? Why would anybody want to read this? So that was a really early, valuable, very expensive lesson in terms of time commitment in the joys of plotting versus pantsing. I'll have an outline, and I give myself permission to deviate from it, but I just find that my writing time is valuable enough that I need to know a general direction in which I'm heading. So
yeah,
I'm done.
And don't you find when, even with a pretty thorough outline and the tent poles and everything in place, I mean, I personally, I still have chapters I have to throw out, and wrong directions that I run down, and even when I have it pretty well outlined, I'm still finding the story and the characters as I go. So I totally agree with that. Like, there is enough of that.
I'll bet you still get inspired and say, boy, I didn't even think of this, and it was just something out of the blue, where the muse does talk to you, and it takes you in a wonderful new direction that you hadn't outlined at all.
Well, yeah, and that's part of that process. Like Chris was talking about, the real writing is in the editing, right? That's, to me, that comes in that 4th, 5th, 6th, maybe even 7th edit. You think of something that you could have never thought of in your first couple drafts, just because that's intrinsic to the process. It is to my process anyway. So there's enough missteps for me that I don't need to just wing it. I can't wing it.
I mean, I think pantsing is doable, and certainly some people can do it for long format. I think pantsing is definitely doable for really short formats, flash fiction, of course, but like even short stories to some degree. Like if you're going to write a story in a session, in one writing session, it's possible. I know that from my perspective, plotting is more an element of my necessary workflow for my sanity, as much as it is for the story, right? Like there's a little confidence that you get from knowing what chapter 2 and 10 and 20 are going to be, at least even if it's just a kernel of what they're going to be, that lets you write chapter 1. And of course, most of us are talking about thrillers. In my case, we're talking about historical fiction. So sometimes there's a component of the author we need to have some information as opposed to just writing off the cuff in order to move forward. But like a lot of the subjects we've touched on, I think the truth is often in that gray space, right? Like between how is it completely thoroughly plotted, or is there any pantsing going on? Stephen King talks about it on writing, about how he likes to have the roadmap, but if the character wants to get off at an exit, he's going to let that happen. I know that with my stuff, because there's a historical fiction component to it, I often like whatever chapter is next in my process, I have a lot of notes for it. But if I cast out towards the end of the book, those chapters might be pretty thinly noted at this point. It's as I move toward them that they'll get more detailed. And so I suppose and within any writing session, like the characters will surprise us. I think that's part of the excitement of writing is, I was joking before about how it's fun to play God, but sometimes your characters are like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. I'm going to go shoot this guy. And because it's in their character, it fits what's happening and it can still be, but yeah, just the idea of writing a novel length piece with no plan is stressing me out just talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I feel the same way. I mean, I think maybe for some writers, I may be putting words in their mouth, but I think some writers hear the word outline and it just takes them back to 7th grade and, Roman numerals and, kind of making an outline like that. And I think we all do it differently. It's not necessarily that as the others have been describing. I mean, it could be just like Emily was saying, just a few tent poles. And, I mean, for me, I do need to know where I'm heading as far as the major tent poles, the major plot points, whatever you want to call them, and the ending, of course. And even if it changes, which it often does in revision and so forth, I need to know that. And also for me lately, I've been paying a lot more attention to, characters. So there's plot-driven fiction and there's character-driven fiction, and I think you sort of plot for either one still. But for me, lately, I've been spending a lot more time before I start writing on each of the main characters and, what their backstory is, and that iceberg kind of metaphor that is often used with fiction, which is all the stuff under the water. And after doing that, it seems like I sort of know what this person's life is, and so knowing what's going to happen to them next is actually not that hard in a way. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just sort of following along with the rest of their arc. We know where they are, what they're having trouble with, what they have to get through by the end of the book, and the arc sort of becomes apparent. Now, there's obviously a lot of different ways to get there, and that's what you have to decide as far as plot goes. But yeah, that's the way I've been doing it lately.
I like the point you brought up that some people get a little turned off or even intimidated by the idea of an outline. It's sort of in contrast to George's experience as a young writer being told how to do it. I remember going to an Emory in the evening, like how to write a book class 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And got a great piece of advice, which was, if you're staring at a blank page and you don't know what to do, and what you do is you can take like note cards or Post-it notes or even just on a piece of paper, and as quickly as possible, you write down every idea you've got for the book or the short story or whatever it is. And then you can, once they're down, then you can sort them. You can sort of put them in order, see where the holes are in the story. But like, boom, you've got an outline. It doesn't have to be like all formal and proper and indented with dots and boxes and stuff. And Ellie and I have used this with, we've got a short film script we're working on right now where we were trying to collaborate. So we both wrote all our ideas down on note cards and then put them together to see where we overlapped or where she had a great idea that I hadn't thought of and vice versa. And it gives you a place to start because like it's so much easier to have something that you can then edit and tweak than to have that cursor on a blank page, like kind of mocking you. Like, go ahead, start writing, buddy. Let's see what you got. And it's the, I just think from different creative people are going to work different ways, but any tool we can give ourselves as writers to help with our confidence, help with sort of our coherence, like, I don't know why we wouldn't take advantage of that.
Hey, do we need to define the verb to pants that we need? That we mean writing by the seat of your pants for those who have not heard that new word. Excuse me.
I think Jesse had it.
Flying by the seat of your pants. Is that where it's from?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
As opposed to walking up behind someone and pulling their pants down, which is also pantsing.
Yeah, it's not that kind of pantsing.
It's not that pantsing at all. That's what Booker.
We discourage that.
Right. No, that's what happens after too many drinks at the conferences or something. I don't know.
Yeah, not good. That's a lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. That's harassment and everything else. So
that sounds like a disaster looking for a place to happen somewhat on both levels with that word pantsing. So, like I said, I'd heard the word plot so many times, it was just, okay, let's expound on it, because we hadn't really discussed plot. And you're right, when I hear the word outline, I do think of that 7th grade letters and indents and every little thing filled in outline. And it's nice to know that that's not necessarily what writing's all about. Now, is there anybody else? Well, I've got one more question that's actually here on my list. And then I'm going to open it up to things that you guys would like to talk about that we haven't covered. But guess what we've got to do first? Anybody have any guesses?
Commercial break?
Bingo! So we will be right back on the other side.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working